Yeah, so I'll just like start with classic heuristics and biases. But before talking about what is a heuristic and what is a bias, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, so two psychologists back in the 1960s, the late 1960s, were thinking about the way that we are thinking. So looking at all the ways in which our thinking can go wrong. So you might be familiar with some of these biases, especially if you're in psychology, especially if you're taking cognitive psychology classes or any introduction to psychology classes. But hopefully some of these are going to be new to you. The McGurk effect. How many of you have heard of the McGurk effect before? Some of you have. Many of you haven't, which is nice. I think we have a TikToker that took a very classic illusion and then tried to make it into something interesting. So here she writes, you will only hear the word you're reading. She's going to give you two options. And in these two options, you should focus on one of the sides, and then you'll hear what it is that she's pointing to. And then I'm going to run this again. And then please look at the other one, and then you'll hear what it is that she's pointing to, even though it's exactly the same sound. So let's run this. Okay, so hopefully you heard one of those. It's a little bit obscure, but... Okay, one last time. Very curious, because what is the connection between brainstorm and green needle? Nothing connects between the two, but it's amazing what the brain does, right? So we'll just see like a short video on this. I hope it will run well.
At any one moment, we are being bombarded by sensory information. Our brains do a remarkable job of making sense of it all. It seems easy enough to separate the sounds we hear from the sights we see. But there is one illusion that reveals this isn't always the case.
Ba, ba, ba.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed. In every clip, you are only ever hearing ba with a B.
Ba, ba. Ba.
It's an illusion known as the McGurk effect.
Ba.
Take another look.
Ba.
Concentrate first on the right of the screen.
Ba.
Now to the left of the screen.
Ba.
The illusion occurs because what you are seeing clashes with what you are hearing.
In the illusion, what we see overrides what we hear. So the mouth movements we see as we look at a face can actually influence what we believe we're hearing. If we close our eyes, we actually hear the sound as it is. If we open our eyes, we actually see how the mouth movements can influence what we're hearing.
Classic effect has been used by many TikTokers, and most recently Veritasium. If you know this YouTuber, but he's terrific about communicating science-related findings. And then the TikTok generation really took this very, very far. So for example, here, what did you...
That is embarrassing! 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 That is...
What is he saying? Bart Simpson bouncing. What is he saying? It's the Manchester United fan saying that is embarrassing. Yeah, so it's this one over here. And then this one is very annoying. So as you can see, a lot of fun on TikTok. So I'll show you some TikTokers. It's really fun to sit and take psychological findings and try to do something fun with this. I'll show you some classic ones. This is in Thinking Fast and Slow, and almost everybody in judgment decision making, the first chapter, this thing appears. So you've seen this a million times, I can imagine. So which desk is longer? You're calculating. What's the conclusion? Sorry?
The same.
Yeah. So which one seems like it's longer? The one on the left seems like it's longer, but when we put like a ruler there, then we can see that this is actually 20 and this is actually 16. So you can later play with the ruler and see that it's the same ruler, but this one looks longer just because of the way that we do vision. This is also a classic one. So this one seems a lot darker than this one over here, but there's all sorts of ways where I can show you, prove to you that they're actually the same color. So if we take away the context, the reason why this appears darker is because it has a more bright context and this one has a darker context. So our visual system compensates for all of that. But if we take away the context, then they look exactly the same. And if you're still not convinced by this, then you can just like put exactly the same one and see that they're the same, right? So cool stuff. We have some people in the department that do vision related research. So they play around with this. Maybe you know some of the labs or you're even in one. This one is another classic, so context really matters. They're exactly the same size, but somehow this one on the left seems a lot bigger than the one on the right, just because they're surrounded by different sizes. So it's not just the amount of light around it and the shadowing, but also what you compare it against. So many things in judgment decision making have to do with reference points. So what is a reference point? What do we compare this against, right? So many of the themes that happen in visual illusions also happen in judgment decision making. We just need to be very aware of those. This guy, do you know this guy? Akiyoshi. So Akiyoshi is the world expert on activating our visual illusions in order to create some very interesting effects. Following this guy on Twitter is, or X, whatever it's called now, is a delight because he comes up with all sorts of interesting stuff. So he sees scientific papers coming out of another thing that we realize about our vision, and then he tries to manipulate this in all sorts of meaningful ways. So he comes up with stuff like this, where of course this is static, nothing here moves, but because of our visual system, if we move ourselves right up, all that, we see some movements. So really cool tricks. And he will explain to you what is it that he's doing in order to create this movement in this static page. Some of it can be a little bit disturbing, causing you all sorts of a little bit dizzy when you look at this. So this is still okay. Seems like one side is moving, so the top is moving to one side and the inner circle is moving to the other side. And the only thing that you manipulate here are the shadows and where these little dots are pointed to. This one, all these are of course straight lines, but it doesn't seem like straight lines to us because he was playing just with the black and white next to it. So that's pretty clever. That's, I think, one of the first ones that he did. This is very disturbing. Just looking at this makes me feel a little bit dizzy. You look in, you look out, something here is moving and you're not really sure why, but it's of course static. This is also a nice illusion. You can look right and left and then see everything move here. This is an interesting one. So there's no depth here, obviously, but the blue one looks like it's more distant and the red one is closer to you. And he plays with this in all sorts of interesting ways and creating all sorts of stuff. So a lot of stuff going on in Twitter in regarding to this. This is especially disturbing because wherever you look, it seems like it's curved, but nothing here is curved. So the way that you look at this creates kind of a bending of the straight lines. Fascinating stuff. I hope you get to take one of these courses that explains these things. So not my field, but every time I see one of these things, I'm baffled. And then here as well, it just seems like they're going in a different direction. But if you look up, it goes in one direction. You look down, it goes in the other direction. Very, very strange stuff going on. Magic. So we'll talk a little bit about magic. But sometimes you can create magic by just knowing how the brain works. So very peculiar stuff. I collect these things. It's fun to look at these. So you can later look at it. What is this? What do you see here? What is in the picture? Deer, yeah. So if we just like flip the thing around, what is it that we see over here? What's there? Suddenly it's a lot clearer that there's no deer there, right? It's just like a bunch of carvings. But we saw depth when it was posted the other way around. So it's interesting how from this from this thing we got this thing. So our brain plays tricks on us. Sometimes we see something that's very different from reality, right? So that's kind of the big theme of cognitive biases for illusion. But then we'll see that there are many things that we do when we are faced with situations, not in interpreting imagery, the world, but also in the way that we are facing a decision. Sometimes the mind plays tricks on us. Instead of seeing reality, what we see is something very, very different. And then we really need to work on ourselves and change the perspective in order to see what reality is. It's also the case with misinformation. Sometimes it's almost obvious what is happening here. Everybody's like, of course, this is what's happening here. But if you know the bias, if you know what's happening, you take a slightly different perspective, then you realize that what everybody is seeing is actually completely different. Right? They're experts over there in Japan to do all these very interesting cognitive illusions. It's a little bit like an MC Escher experience. So there's a competition. This is the best of the competition. Every year they have this competition of who gives the best illusions. And now I've also seen, because I travel a lot around the world, I've seen that there's the Museum of Illusions. It's a franchise, and they let you play with these things. So it's nice for me because I've been to many of those, and they're exactly the same thing. But I still go wherever I am in the world. I still go. But it's nice to see people play with this and try to figure out what the illusion is and what exactly is happening over there. So every year, new submissions, new things that are happening. It's fun to think about these things and try to design these things and try to figure out what's happening with them. So what's meant to display here for you in this video is that sometimes you see the illusion, something doesn't make sense, but you're not really sure what's happening over there. But if you slightly change the perspective, then it becomes very clear what the illusion is. So here, what's happening? How is this like standing at the top of the roof over there? But if you change the perspective, you see it's not exactly a roof, just a certain perspective looking at something, thinking that this is a house and a roof. How is this ball going up? Just position this in a certain way. So very interesting. There's a whole field dedicated to this. So now if you change the perspective, now it becomes very clear what it is that they've done with this. So they play with the angles, they play with everything else. Yeah. So it looks like they're straight, but they're not straight. You flip it around, you see what the illusion is and how they created it. So fun stuff. Love these things. This one, a change in focus. So what exactly is happening here? Sometimes we have a very dimensional kind of reality. And the question is, how can we make sense of it? And sometimes by focusing on different aspects of reality, we see something else going on. So let's just play this. This really messes with your brain. So, really nice illusion. So your perspective of what's happening in this photo just like shifts every time they change something. Yeah, good stuff. I just wanted to show you that sometimes we make use of these things. So here's an example. I'll just play this example. What is that they've done here? What do you see? Seems like they're almost walking on air, right? But this is a visual illusion that we use in judgment decision making to do something that we call a nudge. So the purpose is that there is a road here, and the road is quite wide. And sometimes cars just like speed through it, so they don't obey the speed limit. And we want to help them slow down, so we need to scare them a little. Just putting a traffic sign that says slow down doesn't seem to work. So we were trying to think of some other ways to encourage people to slow down, and this is the way that they came up with. Yeah, so basically they just painted the road in a way that would allow it to show as if it has any depth, and then the cars, when they come in, they see this thing, they think that there's something on the road, and then they slow down. It's just to slow them a little bit. Nothing too major, but it's a nice trick, and it helps a little bit with slowing things down. And we call this a nudge. We're going to talk about nudges a lot in this course. Another nudge is, for example, here we have this very strange situation where you have a fitness center. So people go to the fitness center in order to become fit or stay fit. And then you've got stairs or you've got the escalator. And the question is, if you go to the gym in order to be fit, like why wouldn't you take the stairs? So people take the escalator. So sometimes we want to encourage them to take the stairs instead of the escalator. So that's, you'll see over here on the right that sometimes we give encouragement to, I want to climb the stairs to fitness. Where I was in Maastricht, in university in the Netherlands, where I did my postdoc, almost nobody took the elevators. It was almost frowned upon. If you would take the elevators, people would ask, is everything okay? Are you unwell? Like, what's happening with you? And they worked on this for many years. So over the years, they've nudged people to the stairs a lot, so that people just generally don't take the elevators anymore. And we were on the 4th floor. It has 6 floors. So some people just like take this. And it's a nice recreational event where everybody is walking on the stairs together. I tried to do this here, but people were looking at me funny. Why am I taking the stairs when I first came here? And what was nice about this is that every stairs told you how many calories you're burning. And some of the stairs also had some messages to encourage you. It's like, you're doing great, keep going, all this kind of stuff. And another really cool trick that they had is that when you entered the place where you had the choice between the stairs and the elevators, you had footprints that were showing you the way towards the stairs rather than the elevator. So all these together over the course of about 5 years changed the behavior from everybody taking the elevators to everybody taking the stairs. So in judgment decision making, when we do these nudges, we talk about a choice architecture. So generally, we don't want to force anybody to take the stairs instead of the elevator. So we don't want to take away the elevator so everybody takes the stairs. So we want to keep the choices the same as they are. We don't want to force anybody to do anything, but we do want to give nudges, a little bit of a push to encourage people to go to the thing that we think would be healthier for them. Lots of big discussions. At first, economists were really against this because they don't like people nudging them in any direction. So they call this paternalism. And they don't like anybody who's paternalistic, because if you have nudges, you can be a good player. Let's say, suppose that the government is a good player, so they want all of us to be healthy or reduce health costs for the government. But it could be somebody who is a little bit more evil. Who is evil and uses nudges? Who is an evil player? Marketing folks. Anybody from marketing here? So I did my PhD in the business school. I'm now in my psychology department, and there's a reason why I moved from the business school and the marketing and the management world to psychology, because I felt a little bit uneasy about marketing in trying to get people to buy things that they don't need for more money, right? So I decided that some people need protection. So I want to move to the side of psychologists who try to defend for marketers, try to defend from social media, try to defend you, the individual, from all sorts of other things. So we need to be very, very careful in the way that we nudge people. So nudge can be used for good, nudge can be used for bad. For example, in nudging, we talk a lot about, in the choice architecture, about things regarding friction. So for example, if we want to prevent you from doing something that we think is bad for you, we create friction. We make it more difficult for you to access that option, right? However, friction is something that you know very well from a lot of companies that do this for you. So for example, subscribe, free, just one click, subscribe. If you want, you can cancel anytime. What is cancel anytime? Big friction. You need to call a number, spend 5 hours, and then you need to talk to a person, and you need to talk to a manager, and then you need to send a form, and then maybe they'll consider whether to cancel the subscription or not. So marketing folks are very, very clever on how to use everything that we talk about here in judgment decision-making and nudges in order to create friction in the wrong direction. But generally, we are talking about helping you or helping lay people in the street in order to do better. A paternalistic way of trying to increase health and well-being altogether. Another example of a nudge, this became very famous. Have you heard of this one with the piano? Maybe you've seen this before. Think about this as I show you this and tell me what can go great and what can go wrong with this. Success, right? 66% increase taking the stairs instead of the escalators. What can go wrong with this? What is it that we're missing? What is it that they didn't think about too much after this? Any downsides to this intervention?
They are the stairs, yeah.
So yeah, they can play with this. Maybe they'll block other people and all that, but it's good. It's good to get more people excited about using the stairs. Actually, maybe in the long run, this is going to be a good thing. But yeah, this is maybe one of the unintended consequences. People are going to play with this. There's going to be some media attention, right? Anything else that might go wrong here? Yeah, random notes. It's already, just listening to this a little bit, I'm already annoyed with all these notes, right? Because it's not like melody. So if somebody actually plays with this, that's quite nice. But if it's just like people hearing these notes, can get annoying. So definitely there's that. Anything else? What else might happen?
I would add on this.
Yeah.
That perhaps people would completely avoid using the six because it's too noisy.
Yes. Yeah. So it's interesting. So that's one thing that you need to really think about. Thank you for that, for all the comments. Because if you want to measure whether this intervention actually works or not, it's not enough to know whether this exit had 66% choosing the stairs over the escalator, but you generally need to see how many people are choosing that specific exit. And it could be that if you've seen that thing and it's annoying you because of the notes, then you might prefer not to use that at all or use something else. And if that's the only exit and the only other thing that you have is, let's say, an elevator becomes a little bit. So overall, this might be nice at the beginning, but then you also need to track it over time and see what happens over time. So the beginning, it seems like something very exciting and people are really into it. But then after a while, it fades off and then even tends to backfire, especially if over time it needs maintenance. So there are costs and then some of the notes don't work and then it becomes really annoying and then it goes off key, all sorts of things that you need to think about when you do these kind of things. So it looks like a very simple intervention that can have big effects, but you have to see everything that happens in the station. So look at also other exits and see what the implications are, not for just the week that's after, but also in the long term. So they did not end up implementing this for all of the stations over there. All right, we'll do some magic tricks. Have you seen this guy before, or the magic trick? No? I'll show you the magic trick, but I feel like you deserve a break. So I'll give you like 5-minute break. We'll come back and we'll see some magic. Quick remember a card. Here we go.
Quick, remember a card. Now, you could have thought of any one of these cards, okay? But watch this. If I just take the cards, bring it onto the water bottle like this, you'll notice something crazy happens with this water bottle. Because look, if you just open up the water bottle, inside you will find a playing card. And would the playing card have been your Ace of Spades? Let me know if I got it right in the comments down below.
How many did he get right? Did he get right yours? Some of you? Who didn't he get right? Did not get right? You chose something else? Okay. Yeah, so this is a classic magic trick. I'm going to show you one more version. I was very surprised. One day I was flying with Elal. Elal is the national airline for Israel, where I grew up. So I went to go see my parents. And then to my great surprise, Elal had a safety instruction with this magic trick. So I'll show you that. So you have another chance to try this out and see if this one works on you or not. Oh, come on. I thought I finished. All right.
Welcome aboard this El Al Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft. I'm Leo Sushalt, a mentalist. Before we begin, let's try something. I'm going to flick through this deck, and I want you to try to see one card inside. Ready? Nah, that was too fast. I'll do it again. Did you get one? Try to remember it till the end of the video.
Did you get one? Let's move on to the end. This one's the end.
On behalf of El Al, I thank you for your attention, and we wish you a pleasant flight. Oh, almost forgot. Remember your card?
Yeah. Did you get it right? Did you get the right card? Yeah. All right, so what is this thing? What is the trick here?
Quick!
I just wanted to show you that we write academic articles on this stuff. So this is a real academic article, and it's called Influencing Choice Without Awareness. So we bring people in and we run these magic tricks on them in order to see whether we can influence their choices in some way. So here it explains the magic trick. So we hire magicians in order to be our RAs, in order to run these kinds of things on the participants. And here it explains that one card is shown a little bit longer, just a little bit longer than most of the other stuff. And then what's interesting is that although the magician could influence the choice almost every time, in 98% of the time, he could influence the choice of the participant who came into the lab, only very few, 9%, noticed this influence. So it's quite shocking with nudges sometimes, like if you have a really good magician that can play in order to just increase by a little bit the card that is displayed a little bit longer, then it can influence your choice and your memory of what was flipped through. So allegedly, there's lots of cards for you to choose from, but you focus on the one that you saw the longest. So they have like really interesting experiments with that. They show you this in all sorts of different ways. And we also do this. Maybe you've heard of this experiment. It's a very nasty experiment. Classic was published in Science in 2005. So sometimes magic tricks and judgment decision making make it to the big journals. So what they did over here is that they came in and they asked somebody, they gave them two options, two pictures, and they said, which one is more attractive for you? And then they chose one of the two, in this case, women. So they point into one of them, but then they take them two, and then the magician, without you noticing, flips the choice so that it's actually the woman that you did not choose, and then asks you to argue, why did you choose this woman? And then people start arguing why they chose the other woman when it wasn't their choice. So they're not even aware, seems like, they're not even aware of the woman that they chose. So it's quite amazing. We have a lot of choice blindness kind of thing. We're going to come back to this and the invisible gorilla a little bit later. Maybe you've heard of the invisible gorilla, maybe some surprising things for you with the invisible gorilla. But sometimes we have magicians and we have all sorts of cognitive tricks in judgment decision-making in order to influence people's choices and even get them to explain to us why the thing that they didn't choose is what it is that they chose. So remarkable stuff with this kind of stuff. And you can even get this into Science, Nature, and the big journals. So yeah, there's all sorts of ways in which we do this. It's shocking to see how people explain how they chose the thing that they didn't choose. So for example, I don't know, there's some stuff that have categories about this, about something that's specific, something that's detailed, something that's emotional. So just reading through the explanations of how people explain how they chose this thing that they didn't choose is quite amazing. But there are some people who seem very confused by this. Like, I don't know why I chose this. It doesn't make sense to me. And only very few of them actually push back on this. So there's some people that use this regularly. So there's some more recent replications in 2012. So it's like a dramatic potential for you to influence as choice architects to make even people believe that they chose what it is that you want them to choose just by playing some tricks on them, being a good magician. So a lot of the magic shows are about playing these tricks on you. So always fun when you have a scholar who does these things, and he's also a good magician and can run these things in the lab. So here they show you how they do this trick. So actually they have like a little sticker that is on top of the thing that they ask a person to rate. So for example, they would give somebody all kinds of statements and they say, how much do you agree with this statement? And then immediately when the person doesn't notice, just like in a magic trick, they would take that out and it has the exact opposite arguments. And then they give it back to him. Can you please explain to us why you rated these arguments the way that you did? And people start explaining something that is completely opposite of their arguments. So yeah, judgment decision making, or just being inattentive or not having the mind for this. I'll tell you that somebody ran this on me when I was a student, and it's something that I will never forget. It's very disturbing. So what it is that they do here, maybe I'll just show it to you. I hope that they explain this well enough. Yeah, let's go. Barnum effect.
I asked astrologer Susan Miller to do my horoscope. Miller writes astrology columns for magazines and has a website that's viewed 800,000 times a month. What she gave me was a chart 22 pages long.
You have Jupiter in the 7th house, so you do very well with partners, people who collaborate with you to help you.
This is what's called a cold reading, when you say so much, there's bound to be something in here that'll come true. And of course, there's plenty of flattery.
You have Venus in the 10th house, making you a very popular leader or personality. Do you want me to go on?
In addition,
they use warm reading techniques where they say things that are true for everyone.
Those 3 planets in Pisces makes you very intuitive.
Who doesn't want to think that they're intuitive? There's certain things you can say about people that most of us think are true just about us. Like, you have an above-average sense of humor, or you're not living up to your full potential.
This is silly. What you're saying about me, you could say about anybody. I'm an independent thinker, intuitive, thorough.
But to the nth
Lots
degree.
of people believe this about themselves.
Yes, but I would give perhaps other people different adjectives to describe them.
To show how people fall for this, some years ago for Good Morning America, I had an astrologer do a chart on a mass murderer, Ed Kemper.
Let me pass these out.
Then I gave it to these students, telling them it was their horoscope.
Charlotte Hunter?
Would the mass murderer's horoscope capture their personality? You bet.
I love me.
Why are you laughing? Is it accurate?
Yes. I don't know if I was a believer or a non-believer. I was kind of like in the middle. But this is most of it is me.
How many feel that this came pretty close to capturing you? Okay, I hate to tell you this, but you all got the same horoscope.
Did we?
And I told them whose horoscope it really was.
He's a mass murderer.
I'm glad I didn't tell anybody about this.
And she's forever in this video that I'm going to show students till the end of time. So yeah, there's another demonstration here. So this also became viral on TikTok, of course. And when I was taking my MBA, when I was doing my MBA, they said that there's a special expert that came in. It's very good at assessing our potential and our personality from our handwriting. So they asked us to sign our names. And then they gave us this beautifully, in an envelope, this beautiful letter that tells us everything about ourselves. And all of us were looking into this like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is exactly me. This is, and then what they asked us to do is just compare this to the person next to us. And when we discovered that everybody got the same, well, that was a big shock. So it just tries to get you to be aware of all kinds of manipulations. And these manipulations don't only just come from magicians, but they also come from fortune tellers and people who are astrologers or, try to tell you your future and all sorts of things about you. But you also need to be aware of scholars that tell you all sorts of good things. So you really need to be able to establish the credibility of evidence. So what is it exactly that they're saying? Are they saying anything that's meaningful? What is it that's happening over there? All right. Here's a task for you to count how many characters are in this image. How many characters do you see? So this is a little bit like the invisible gorilla, but after a while, you also realize that there's something else going on. So once you finish counting this and you stare at this photo, you see that there's some fairly disturbing stuff going on over there, right? So if we look at this, there's this, she has like a hand from the neck. What else do you notice? She has a really long hand here. So there's all sorts of things that were put in there that shouldn't be, like this, for example, these small legs. I don't know how many of these you noticed, but at the beginning, we don't notice these things because we have a task. The task is to count how many of these characters we have. So sometimes all it takes is to shift our focus from what is it that we're being asked to just look at things objectively. So sometimes in judgment decision making, we also study focus and distractions. So sometimes you would come into our labs, you can make some good money in coming into our experiments, and they would ask you to do one thing. And sometimes I would do this also in class in the things I can do. But actually what it is that I'm asking you is asking about something completely different. So sometimes I will measure how long it will take you in order to figure out the real thing or the thing that's supposedly the thing that I want to measure, the thing that is the focus of the study. So it's interesting, lots of these kinds of stuff that we can do together. So this is a little bit of an example of like a simple single question experiment. So You can just post something like this, ask somebody to count this, and then just measure how long it takes before they start, looking at this weird and questioning what it is that they're looking at. Here's an interesting one. So I don't know if you can see anything strange about this picture, about this photo. But if you take a closer look, then you realize that actually this is a black and white photo, even though you see some colors here. And what is actually happening is that there's these lines, and the lines are what's causing the color to appear. So sometimes our mind fills in the gaps, even though there's black and white, takes the color and it colors the black and white that's around it. So thereby creating another interesting illusion. So sometimes we study this stuff as well. So the thing is, and the reason why I'm showing you all these illusions and the cognitive biases and what it is that we study in judgment decision making is to tell you that sometimes we are not aware of the cognitive biases that we have. Sometimes being aware of the cognitive biases that we have doesn't really help, because even if you know about the McGurk effect, you cannot turn this off. It will still happen to you. So many have asked Daniel Kahneman if he is now the expert of cognitive biases, doesn't mean that he does not make mistakes, but he is without any cognitive biases. And he always says that these things you cannot override. These are almost immediate, almost inevitable. So sometimes knowing about these biases doesn't really help. You just, you can't control it, but it's good to know that this is happening, and then we can talk about what we can do in order to overcome those. So all sorts of things about processing information, making evaluations, and making decisions. And this is where I'm going to run one of the very famous experiments by Daniel Kahneman by asking you to go on a Mentimeter. So we'll go on a Mentimeter, and this is your Mentimeter. And then we have this question. So we have two groups of organizations. So I'll give you a second to go on Menti and put the code or scan this barcode here. So we have two groups of organizations, Group A or Group B. This was run in 2003. So I think Thinking Fast and Slow came out in 2011. And the question is, in 2003, which I know for you seems like a long, long time ago. I mean, it was just yesterday. Yeah, so I'm going to hide this out. So which of the two groups had larger total sales revenues in 2003? So of course you don't know. Many of these companies maybe you've never heard about, but you try and do your best guesstimate. You try and think of these companies, what do you know, and try to make an assessment. Because many times we need to make decisions even though we don't exactly know what the context is, right? So in Group A, we've got Reebok, Hilton, Starbucks, Radio Shack, and Hershey Foods. And in Group B, we've got Cocono Phillips, American International Group, McKesson, and this thing Bergen, and Altria Group. Okay. All right, so we got 24 of you. Before we look at the results, what is happening here? What is the big thing about this? Any ideas? Yes, please.
Some companies are apparently more famous than the other.
Yeah, some companies are more famous than the others. Is that what you also wanted to say? Yeah. So what is our inclinations to do when we see something that's famous? Sorry? That's more familiar. Yeah, so there's definitely a familiarity effect. Thank you both for this. Yeah, so I think we wanted to demonstrate something here. We'll come back to this in a second. Here we've got a question about me and my life, even though you don't know much about me, but I would ask you to please guess. So I took an MBA a long time ago, and there was a student in my class who was the best student. He just happens to really like poetry and rather shy and small in size. And do your best to guess what was the student's undergraduate major. Was it Chinese studies or was it economics? Just based on the information provided, yeah. Good. And once you've contemplated that, I will also ask you not only about this person's undergraduate, but I will also ask you about the gender. So try and guess the gender as well. Was it male or female? All right, 17 of you, great. So we'll go back here. So how to make a decision? So one of them is familiarity, right? But how do you really approach this kind of question when you have these kind of companies and you don't know anything and you know that some of them are familiar and some of them are not? How to make an assessment? What else can we do aside from what's familiar? What other cues do we have? Yeah, so here are the organizations. You have it in bigger letters. So when you look at these combinations, Group A and Group B, aside from some of them in A are a bit more familiar than Group B, what else do we have that might help us to make an assessment here? Yes, please. Context. Yeah, so we were more familiar with the industries in Group A as well. So it's not just the brands, but also the kind of business that they do. Group B is a little bit difficult to know. Why is it difficult to know about B, what they're doing? Why is it difficult? They're not in the names. What do you see in their names? What can we know about them? Yeah, in the first one. How about the second one? What do we know about the second ones? We know something about them. Place names. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else do we see over there? What else? Group. We see a group, right? So we already know it's not just like a single brand. There's a group. What else? What other keyword is in there? American, international as well, right? Yeah. Yeah. So these groups actually own these brands in group A and many other brands, right? So we're not familiar with the holding groups, but these holding groups own the brands and much, much more than that. So actually, the answer here is B. But just like you pointed out, most people go for the familiar and they ignore some of the cues about international in a group, big group, right? So Starbucks is Starbucks and Radio Shack and, Reebok and all of those. We're familiar with them, but it's like this one brand. These groups do everything. They just like have their hands in everything that's happening. And one of the brands also has to do with like, let's say food or shoes or something like that. So interesting. If you want to know a little bit more about that, this is very famous by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, Judgment in Managerial Decision. You'll get to know these books quite often. But what's interesting here, and this is one of the things you need to do in your task 3, is we have a single question that has something a little bit strange about it. We don't have a lot of information. And most people tend to go with A, whereas the answer is actually B. So there is a bias here. So we can go and see what it is that you actually answered here. And here we don't have, first of all, we don't have like a significant difference between A and B, sample a little bit low. But typically what we get when we run this on people is that most of them tend to answer A rather than B. So you've done a good job. Maybe you know that we're playing some tricks here, maybe you know to avoid those. So very good. You're going to keep getting smarter with this because I'm going to give you many of those. How about the second one here? How to go about thinking about this? What information do we have? Yes, please. MBA class. Yeah, MBA is Master's in Business Administration, so it has to do with business, right? Right. So that's the way to go about doing that, right? So you're thinking, who goes to get an MBA? Mostly people who have some background in economics or people who want to learn how to manage or how to do business, that kind of thing, right? So the tendency for you, or if I understand correctly, you would choose the economics, right? Good. What other cues are there? Thank you. What other cues in this? What other things are in there, information that is given? We have some information about the best students. So the best one in MBA class. So I think this kind of supports the economics direction, but also writes poetry and rather small and shy, right? So I don't know why, but the stereotype, at least for Daniel Kahneman, when he was running this in the 1970s, was that this would be stereotypical of somebody who studies Chinese studies, right? So it seems like most people go for A. But the right way to do this is exactly that, to think in terms of the odds. When we look at the population, who is more likely to enroll in an MBA and to go for that? So we can just like look at the results here. Economics, good. So many of you got this right. We still have like 13 and 12. Maybe it's the same people who go for the other option. But there is a way of getting this right. So if you got this one right, then the other one with the gender, what's the right answer here? Unfortunately, still the case in Hong Kong, but a lot more in the MBA class are what? Very male. I think in Israel it balanced out a little bit. So back in 2003, it was not looking good, but now I think females are starting to dominate the MBA classes. So here, 13, 12, okay, yeah. But if you think about it, it seems like far more, especially in 2003, especially in Hong Kong, that it would be male. Avoiding the rather shy. I don't think that's true for females as a stereotype, but small in size, I think, is the one that gets most people. And maybe writing poetry. How many males are writing poetry? I don't know. Hopefully many. So these are the classic ones that Daniel Kahneman started with. So you can see there's a single question. One of the things in this question is pointing in one direction, whereas if you look at rationally and you analyze quantitatively everything that's in there, then you would go and get this correctly. If you got these ones right, then here's another thing, a classic one, also from Thinking Fast and Slow. Maybe you know this already. It's before your time. Apologies for this, but from the 1990s until the 2000s, there was a population of 300 million people. Maybe I can even let you rank this. So there's a ranking here. So please try and rank the following causes of death in the United States during those years, this decade, the 1990s, the population. I could not enter this in the Mentimeter, but also please try and estimate the number. Have a number in mind, like how much more is this a killer compared to the other things? So let's try and think together. What is the distractor? What would most people answer? And what is it that we're going to answer because we know already what the professor is trying to do? What would most people say is the number one killer? What's the typical reaction for the average person in the street if we go and we ask them, what do you think will get the highest ranking? What would people say? Firearms. Who said that? Yeah. Why is that? US. Say more. Say more. Yeah. School shootings. Yeah. Anything else? Right, right. So it's a big controversy over there about the right to bear arms, whether this is a constitutional right. Something you want to say? Yes, please. Right. Yes. Yes. So some of these things, thank you. Some of these things get a lot of media attention. So when there's a shooting, especially a school shooting, a madman goes around and sprays people. A lot of people die from this in these schools. I don't know why, but almost every month there's a school shooting in the US. It's a big problem over there. It gets a lot of media attention. And then people try to do something about this with political debates. There was one yesterday, very heated about this. I think Kamala Harris was surprising everybody that she bears arms. So it was like a whole thing in the US regarding that. So it gets a lot of media attention. What seems like the least likely that people will think is not a cause for death of all these things? What doesn't cause a lot of death? Sorry? Or that is not a cause? Yeah, can you say more? Very good. Long-term effect. Yeah, very good. There's like a host of reasons why people would think that poor health is not a main killer. It's a little bit difficult to identify, right? Poor diet. What is a poor diet? How do we really know that this is the cause of death? If there's a shooting, then we know exactly what killed the person who died from the shooting. If it's health-related or diet-related, do we really know that it was that? Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was old age. We never know. It's a little bit difficult to know exactly what this is from. So let's see how you ranked this. So poor diet, tobacco, motor vehicle, illicit, and then firearms. So yeah, very good. You're pretty much on track. So at least in the 1990s, it was in exactly the same order as it's presented here. But the interesting thing is that to see just how much more tobacco and poor diet were from things like firearms, right? So in order of magnitude more. An interesting thing that happened in the last 2 decades, not just in the US, but around the world, is that a lot less people smoke, much fewer people smoke. And therefore things have changed, which is why I also included this, which is very, very small. So you can't really see this. So I'm going to walk you through this. So this is 2016. So we've got like 2 decades afterwards. I love this website. It's a really good website. Every time I want to know something about a topic, then I go to this website. It's called Our World in Data. They do very good visuals. So they summarize stuff for us. So here we've got media coverage, Google searches, and then causes of death in reality. So what we see is exactly what was discussed here. There's a lot of media attention for things like homicide or things like terrorism. Terrorism really dominates the news all the time. But the number of deaths from terrorism, how many people actually die from terrorism? So you can see it over here. What is it? Less than 0.01%. So it's this little thing over here. How many from homicide? 0.9%. So they get 35.6% of the media attention, but the cause of death, in terms of cause of death, they're very, very small. So there's a big bias here. This is what we think happens. So Kahneman calls this the availability heuristic. So what is available, the information that comes to your mind, because we watch the media. But actually what happens in reality is most people actually die from heart disease and cancer. So we've got like heart disease in 30.2. How much does the media talk about heart disease? 2.5%. So 30% to 2.5%. Cancer gets like 30% cause of death. People Google this a lot, but in terms of the media attention, it doesn't get very much. But then also to things like road incidents and Alzheimer's disease and strokes. These are the big causes of death in a place like the US in the last decade or so. But when we ask people what the cause of death is, they have a lot of biases around this. And the reason for these biases is indeed the media. The availability of information, it's biased. There's a reason why the media does this. There's nothing very immediate and threatening, just like you said, about heart disease. But if you want to sell newspapers, the way for you to sell the newspapers is to create some panic. So people would want to buy the newspapers, feel like there's something urgent that they need to take care of. So we're going to talk about all of these things a little bit later. I really recommend these two books. I don't know if you're familiar, but Factfulness. So Hans Rosling, that created the Gapminder. Fascinating person. I think we maybe even have a little bit of time. Maybe we can watch the video. And then Steven Pinker, a great thinker and a social psychologist that talks about rationality. And what I like is just generally in terms of cognitive biases, I really like this little slogan that they have over here. 10 reasons we're wrong about the world and why things are better than you think. So a lot of things make us feel very negative about the world. It's influenced by social media, but actually if we look at the trends, we realize that actually good things are happening in the world if we just take a moment to look at the trends and look at the real data. So Our World in Data does a really good job in summarizing this. So we have a little bit of time, so I'm going to show you Hans Rosling. How many of you have seen Hans Rosling before or know Hans Rosling? Oh, not many? Okay, good. Unfortunately, he also passed away, but his son carries on the torch, and he's the one in charge of the Gapminder. So I'll just show you a little bit of Hans Rosling's spirit, and it's an excellent book. I strongly recommend it.
Poland, Russia, Pakistan, and South Africa. And these were the results of the Swedish students. I did it so I got a confidence interval which was pretty narrow, and I got happy, of course. I had 1.8 right answer out of 5 possible. That means that there was a place for a professor of international health and for my course. But one late night, when I was compiling the report, I
should just say, he gave them a test in order to see how much they know about the world. So he had asked them, for example, data about which country has the highest child mortality. So for example, Sri Lanka or Turkey, Poland or South Korea, Malaysia. So he just gave them this test. And what they did on this test, so the mean is that they got 1.8 wrong with a certain mean, right? So let's see how this goes.
Really realized my discovery. I have shown that Swedish top students know statistically significantly less about the world than the chimpanzees. Because the chimpanzee would score half right. If I gave them 2 bananas with Sri Lanka and Turkey, they would be right half of the cases. But the students are not there. The problem for me was not ignorance, it was preconceived ideas. I did also an unethical study of the professors of the Karolinska Institute that hands out the Nobel Prize in medicine, and they are on par with the chimpanzee there. So this is where I realized that there was really a need to communicate, because the data of what's happening in the world and the child health of every country is very well aware. So we did this software which displays it like this. Every bubble here is a country. This country over here is this is China. This is India. The size of the bubble is the population. And on this axis here, I put fertility rate. Because my students, what they said when they looked upon the world, and I asked them, what do you really think about the world? Well, I first discovered that the textbook was Tintin mainly. And they said the world is still we and them. And we is Western world, and them is third world. And what do you mean with Western world? I said, well, that's long life in small family, and third world is short life in large family. So this is what I could display here. I put fertility rate here, number of children per woman, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to about 8 children per woman. We have very good data since 1962, 1960 about, on the size of families in all countries. The error margin is narrow. Here I put life expectancy at birth, from 30 years in some countries up to about 70 years. And 1962, there was really a group of countries here that was industrialized countries, and they had small families and long lives. And these were the developing countries. They had large families, and they had relatively short lives. Now, what has happened since 1962? We want to see the change. Are the students right? It's still 2 types of countries? Or have these developing countries got smaller families and they live here? Or have they got longer lives and live up there? Let's see. We start the world. And this is all UN statistic that has been available. Here we go. Can you see there? It's China. They're moving against better health. They're improving there. All the green Latin American countries, they are moving towards smaller families. The yellow ones here are the Arabic countries, and they get larger families, but they, no, longer lives, but not larger families. The Africans are the green down here. They still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there, but not Bangladesh. It's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner. And in 90s, we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world.
So he wanted to overcome cognitive biases that also happen for people who give out the Nobel Prize in medicine, but also the Swedish students. So instead of basing our intuition of what happens in the world, there's we and there's them, we can put everything in data visualization. And then, for example, if you want to go now, you can just go on this website, and Gapminder allows you to know exactly if you want to know causes of death and homicide, how much is it out of that. But if you also want to know everything else, they have very extensive things that you can choose, emissions, society, everything that you want to know nowadays, you have access to it. You don't need to base things on your intuition. But many times our intuition is influenced by cognitive biases that have to do with the media. But we also have access to information where people can go and get the accurate things, and then see the positive trend in the world. So it's really amazing to see what has happened in the world in all sorts of things. interesting stuff. I just gave you like a teaser of all sorts of things that we do, starting from magic and visual illusions all the way to cognitive biases using single question experiments, and then looking at how we know the world. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, about System 1 and System 2 and all of that. Hopefully you got a little bit from all of this, enough for you to make a decision of whether you want to take this course or not. So please have a look at the syllabus. Please see all the stuff that we're going to do. We'll send you a link on the Moodle. Join the Zulip, form your teams, and I hope to see you here next week. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. We'll be happy to help.